sunshine. And even though we had some clouds, there was no rain. We've had a couple of nights with thunder and different things, but on the Sabbath, it's nice to have it like it is. Well, some of you know me, and some of you don't. So I'll tell you, my name is John Howard. I'm a pastor in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, retired. My wife, Millie, you put your hand up. We've been married 62 years. I can still just waddle up to the pulpit without falling. But if I do need the washroom or something, music for 5 minutes while I've gone. I'm getting old, you know. Now, I'm so happy that, Pastor Mosley called me, and he says, John, I'm on a sabbatical. I may want to come and hear you speak, but I'm not working. Would you please take the service for today? Well, you know, I love Pastor Mosley. We've had him for many years. We've retired 20 years from Canada. And in the winter, we come down here. And in many of the churches we've been, he has been the pastor. So what could I do but say yes? Now, we have visitors here. How many are visitors here today who've never been here before? Look at that. Quite a few visitors. How many of them are from Canada? Look at that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Well, this is wonderful. Well, you know, on the second row here, you have Kathy and James Anderson. James is an ordained pastor and has the Bowmanville Church in Canada, in Ontario. And his wife, Kathy, used to be my secretary when I was the director for ADRA Canada. And I tell you, there's another story in that which I may tell you. Some of you know Dr. and Mrs. Handisides, and of course, I feel very close to both of them because Al and I used to go fishing as youngsters, and over the years we see each other. And with Janet, I had the privilege of giving her Bible studies and baptizing her in Kingston and being at their wedding, a wonderful experience. Vanette wanted to come fishing with us as a little girl, and we let her come, and she got some tiddlers. And then you have Janet's brother, George. And I see Louise somewhere. She's not here? Oh, well, anyway, we have George. That's good. And then at the back, we have Peter and Anu, and they're from the Bowmanville Church in Ontario, too. And it's wonderful to see everyone here, and I see people from different churches in Florida that you've joined this church, and I'm certainly glad to see it. Well, I want to ask you a question this morning. Do you have faith to believe that there is a God in heaven who answers prayers? Well, that's a good start. Well, I tell you, I have living proof of one of my answered prayers right here, so I'm going to embarrass her a little, not much. You know, some years ago, my wife and I were both from Europe. I was from England, my wife was from Germany. We both got visas to come to the United States on the same day. We didn't know it. Millie in Germany, myself in London. We came on the same boat, the SS United States. We went to the same camp meeting. And I saw Millie in the back of the car that her brother-in-law was driving. And I was directing traffic. They said, all the pastors were there at camp meeting, and everyone had to have a job. And it was pouring with rain. And the fellow says, John, you were born in England. You know all about rain. You can direct the traffic. So that's what happened. And I saw Millie in the car, and I said to myself, I'm going to give them the best parking spot there is. And I watched and watched all day. And just as camp meeting finished, I saw Millie go into the Book and Bible House. And I said, Millie, what are you doing? She said, well, my boss wants me to work on Sabbath. And I don't speak any English. Not much. And I need a book to give him to show him that Saturday's the Sabbath. I said, you asked the right guy. And I bought her 2 books with the last penny I had. And then I said, I would like to take you home. She said, well, I'm with my sister. You have to ask her. So I asked Millie's sister, and she looked at me. She said, oh, I was hoping somebody would. So, the Lord is good. And then Millie says, well, I've got to ask my father. And, of course, he's from Germany. So she explained that later on, that she'd fallen in love with me, kind of. And he said, well, he's not of the same race as we are. And she said, well, my Bible says, and you taught me to love your enemies. So and that was the end of that. The Lord was good. He answers all kinds of prayers. So the only one thing I asked Millie before we got married, I said, would you be willing to go with me anywhere God asked me to go? Millie said, I'd love to. And she's been faithful all these years. No matter where we've gone, she's been willing to go. And there is a God who answers prayers. I've had a happy and wonderful life. And now at the end, I'm grateful to be here with you. Now, I spent 7 years in the United States with my wife. We pastored in New York, Maryland, and I canvassed in Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, went to Southern Missionary College, got my bachelor's there, got the master's at Andrews, and then I had a call to go to Ottawa. I pastored in Ottawa and worked in the Ontario-Quebec Conference for 7 years, and one night I had a dream. And I dreamt I was preaching in French to people of African origin. And I woke up and in a cold sweat. And you excuse my ignorance, but I only could think of one country in those days, and that was Haiti. But I just put it off. About 5 days later, I get a phone call from the General Conference. John, we want you and your wife to go as missionaries to Africa. And I said, which country? They said, we'll let you know. Well, in the Review and Herald, there was an article about people in Zaire that had heard from the Lord, they felt, that Sabbath was the right day to keep. They asked, where is the closest Adventist church? It was 4 days' walk from where they lived over to East Zaire. And I read this article in the Review, and I said to Millie, I think it'll be the Congo that we're going to. A couple of days later, there was a phone call, and it was. If the Lord hadn't had me with that dream, I'd have said no. We were as happy as could be. We were living in a nice house. Our children were in church school. Everything was perfect. But Lord asked, and I wondered, when I'd asked Millie, would she go wherever I felt the Lord led me, what would happen if I myself was a little hesitant? But we went, and the Lord led and guided in so many ways, and I'm so happy and blessed. Well, before we left for Africa, I had always wanted to work. My mother used to read to me the stories of David Livingstone, and I recalled how he would go to Cape Town, and he went as far as the train would go. And he got up into the Congo to a little town called Niangwe. And I thought, boy, I'll never get there. The roads were terrible. When we finally left for Africa, we had to learn French first. So they sent us to Paris. At 6 o'clock every morning, I'd go to the market and try and learn a few words so I could order food for breakfast. And if what I pronounced was what I received, I'd write it down, and then I'd try something else. And sometimes it would be an odd breakfast, because that's all I could figure out. But the Lord in His mercy helped. And the thing is this. When we finally left France, we had to go to England to get on the boat. And we got on the Windsor Castle. And we went from Southampton to Cape Town. Now, I had bought, the only once in my life I ever bought a new car. And I thought I better have one to go over there. And I bought one. It was $968 brand new. I bought it in Oshawa, Canada, and it was a French car, a Renault 4L. We picked it up in Paris, and that boat allowed anyone going over to Africa to take so many cubic feet free. The size of the car was exactly that cubic footage. We put everything in it, locked it up, and put it on. Didn't cost us anything. We got to Cape Town. I had a horrendous toothache. They took me to the dentist. By the time the tooth was out, the car was ready for us to drive. And we drove from Cape Town to the Congo. There were dry places. We saw in the Karoo, where there hadn't been rain in years, and it rained a couple of nights before we got there. We woke up the next morning, everything was flowers. And I said to myself, where the Bible says the desert will bloom, it made me think one day God is going to create all things new. And even if it's a mess today, it can be recreated. Well, that was a long trip all up through. I wanted to drive as a young person from Cairo to Cape Town. I've done more than half of that distance, more than once, but I've never gone the whole way. But I'm not dead yet, so who knows? Well, I tell you, God does answer prayer, because I'm going to switch back now just a little to when we came back from Africa. They asked me to be in charge of ADRA Canada, which was the Adventist Development and Relief Agency. And I had no one really to help me that was able to do anything. The secretary I had couldn't remember from the day I gave her something till she got to the door of the office. And it was so discouraging for me, because we had projects in so many countries. I just knelt down by my desk and I said, Lord, if you want me to do this, you have to send me somebody that can do it, to be a help. While I was still praying, there was a knock on my door. And who was it? It was Kathy Anderson. Put your hand up. She was working in a woodwork shop, and she said in her own heart, why am I carrying lumber? I was trained to be a secretary. That's what I want to do. So she came and asked if there was a job, and there was a job for the education department. But the treasurer, a nice guy, he said, John needs one more than anybody, and he sent it down to me. And I won't tell you some of this, but it was just a miracle. Kathy knew French and English both fluently. I had to type in both, and by the time she left, she was in charge of relations for the donor relations. And with her letter writing and encouragement, more than $1 million she was able to bring in, just like that. And God has blessed in many, many ways. But that's after Africa. Now, I'd like you, first of all, I just want to have a word of prayer, and we turn to the Scriptures. Our dear loving Father in heaven, I do want to thank you so much for the many blessings you've given to us. We thank you for the way you've guided us through life, the way you take care of us in all that we do. And I pray today, Lord, as you've given us counsel in your Scriptures, that we'll be able to be faithful to you, to believe in you, and to realize that through Jesus we have eternal life. Guide us now, I pray, in Jesus' name. Amen. Now, I often think back. When I landed in New York, I had $10 and a bicycle. And that was it. And it wasn't very easy to get to Tennessee like that. But anyway, we did, with God's help. And everything, I think to Millie, I say to Millie, everything we have, God gave it. Everything I owned went in the saddlebag on that bicycle. You know? It was amazing what God does. But we're living at a time today when we see trouble on every side. We're told that when Jesus was here on earth, there were many people against what he was doing. And they were fighting and squabbling and accusing Jesus and everything else. You turn on the news today, you don't have to go very far. And you can see gangs of people upset. You can see it in Hong Kong, you see it in China, you see it in Europe, in France, you see it in Baghdad. Everywhere in the world, there are groups of people upset about something. No one seems to be content. And yet Jesus was supposed to give us peace of mind. You know, there are many texts in the Bible that teach us a lot of different things. I'd like you to go to Revelation 14 and verse 12. Revelation 14 and verse 12. It says, "Then I heard a voice from heaven saying to me, 'Write, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. Yes, says the Lord, that they may rest from their labors and their works follow them.'" Now, many people have died of our friends and that, but we don't need to worry because they're resting in the grave, and when Jesus returns, they'll be raised. But in verse 12, it says, "Here is the patience of the saints. Here are those who keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus." Now, that is a promise that Jesus said there will be those at the end of time who keep the commandments of God and have the faith of Jesus. Now, in many of the translations, you'll see different things, but basically speaking, God is saying there will be a group of people that keep the commandments of God and have a faith of Jesus at the end day. As Seventh-day Adventists, I think most of us believe that the time is coming when there will be a Sunday law, where people will have to keep the Sunday or not be able to buy or sell. I, in the Congo, had an experience which some of you have read my book, have read it, of course, but to me, it did something to me personally. And I just want to, I know I've got to finish at 1:45, right? So someone put their hand up when I have to stop. But back in the time we were living in the Congo, which became Zaire and which is now Congo again, the president of the country was Mobutu Sese Seko. And he went to China to see what the great Chinese country was doing. And he noticed the streets were clean, beautiful clean. There were white lines for traffic to go. The curbs were all nicely done. And he knew in his country everything looked like it had never been painted since the Belgians left, and he was right. So he asked Mao Tse-tung, "What should I do to help my people?" And Mao Tse-tung said, "It's no problem at all. We have what we call salongu. Every Saturday, every citizen has to work for the government free. Everyone who has a house, he must clean the street in front of his house. He must paint the curb, paint the houses. Every Saturday, that's what's done." Mobutu came back on a Wednesday. Thursday, he got on the radio, and he said, "Everyone Saturday must go for salongu and work. We want our country just like China." Well, I had no radio. I was at a place called Lulangeli. They had dropped me off and given me a truck and said, "You must build an airstrip, and when I finish the airstrip, they will bring Millie up to see me." Well, I was preaching that Sabbath in Lulangeli. In the afternoon, I tell you, I was tired out. It was very hot. I'd been shoveling all week, making water for the houses and then airstrips. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, there was a knock on my window. The the secret police had come, and they arrested Teofasi. Teofasi was the president of our conference. And they asked him, why were your people in church? We were told they had to do Salongo. He said, they're all in prison now, and we've come to get you. And he said, we asked the church members, who taught you that Saturday was the Sabbath? And they gave us your name, so we come to see you. And I could see what was happening. They were going to ask him, who taught you to keep the Sabbath? And he was going to say the missionaries. So I kicked him under the table. I said, someone's got to stay out of here. Anyway, they took Teofasi and all of our members that had not worked, no one worked on Sabbath, took them to jail. And they said, well, the only way we'll go to jail is if Pastor Howard drives us. So I drove the Jeep. I had a soldier beside me with a machine gun on my shoulder, one behind me with one in my neck. We drove all the way to Kananga, the capital city, and as we got to the prison, I heard the most beautiful music next to what we have here, of course. In the morning, they were singing, and they had sung all day long. We didn't get there till about 10 o'clock at night, and the singing was just heavenly. And I said, what's that singing? All of our believers had been in church Sabbath morning, and the soldiers came in, captured them all, and took them to prison, and said they were fighting against the government. Well, anyway, I could see no one had eaten. Their Bibles and their shoes had been taken from them. There were no restaurant, no restroom facilities or anything, just mud on the floor. Terrible place. So I went to a Presbyterian friend, and I asked her, I said, our people are in jail. Could you fix some food for them? So she said, sure, I'd be happy to. So I took the food back, and the guard took the food to eat himself. So I went back to her, and I said, look, could you make me more food? And this time I want a thermostat full of tea, a thermos jug. And so I took that back, and I gave the guard the thermos jug, and while he held it with both hands, I slipped around the corner with the food, gave it to our prisoners, and they were as happy as could be. The next morning, I'm ashamed of myself, but I did go to the airport to see if there were any planes that would go. And there were planes I could have got out of there. But on one of the planes, there was a Baptist preacher from the States. And he said to me, it was pouring rain. He said, could you take me to my church? He said, nobody has come to pick me up. I said, sure, I'll be happy to. And he said, are you coming to our prayer meeting tonight? I said, I haven't been invited. He said, well, I'm inviting you. So I went to the prayer meeting, and they asked, are there any special requests? I said, yes. I'm requesting for our people in prison that you'll pray that they'll be released. Well, Mr. Brewer was the treasurer for the Presbyterians, and he says, John, if you would keep Sunday like the rest of us, you'd have no trouble. And anyway, we had a nice discussion on that, and then Mr. Brewer had just taken the governor of the province fishing. So all the people there said, Mr. Brewer, you take John to the governor in the morning. And so he did. He took me the next morning to the governor, and the governor said, well, what do you want? I'm closed on Mondays. And he said, well, I don't want to be here, but my church group said I must introduce you to Howard Johnson. He called me Howard Johnson instead of John Howard. He was thinking of the restaurant chain. No, he said, I don't believe in what he's doing, but I'm leaving him in your hands. So the governor said to me, what can I do for you? And I said, our people are put in prison because they were worshiping on Saturday. He said, well, Saturday is a day of work. The government has decreed it. I said, but God said that Saturday was a day of worship. He says, no. See, in the Bible that they have, which was in the Chaluba language, everywhere it says Sabbath, they wrote Sunday. It was translated by the local Presbyterian church, and that's what it said. But the governor, his Bible was in French, because he used the Bible to have people swear allegiance and all the rest of it. So he gave me the French Bible, and I read to him in French. And he says, well, that's very clear. It says in there, Saturday's the Sabbath, the seventh day of the week. And he picked up his phone and he said, relâchez les Adventistes, said, inutile de les garder. Release the Adventists, there's no point keeping them. I'm not fighting against the God of heaven. And I'll never forget, I went down to the courtroom, and there was Theophasy. And the judge was there, and he said, why didn't you work on Saturday? And Theophasy said, I would work 6 days of the week, but not on God's holy Sabbath day. And the judge says, I wouldn't work 6 days for Mobutu. Well, Theophasy said, I would, but not on God's Sabbath day. They let the people go. And I said to the judge, what am I going to do next Sabbath? So I went back up to the governor and I said, could you write me a letter? He said, mon parole est assez. My word is enough. What I said, that's it. And from then on, there was no more trouble. God, in his mercy, answered the prayers of thousands. There were 40,000 Adventists to be put in prison. There were not prisons enough for them. I don't know of one who broke down. In fact, there were hundreds in church the next Sabbath that thought, hey, this is the end of the whole thing. They'd read what was going to happen. And they showed up for the first time in years. But God does answer prayer. Now, there's one little thing that amazed me. Some years later, I had Millie come with me up to Lulangeli, and she stayed. The airport was finished. They finally brought Millie there. And we got a note, and it said, come and preach in this town tomorrow. We got it on Friday. And I said, we do not have a church in that town. Well, the amazing thing to me was that it was so urgent that I go. It would be just like here if somebody said, come and preach at a town in Florida where there isn't a church, an Adventist church. Well, Millie didn't come with me because she stayed at the church in there, but my young son said, I'll go with you. When we got to the church, sure enough, there was a building there. And we got there at 9:30 for Sabbath school, and I started preaching, and I said, well, how did this church get here? And they said, well, the chief came and talked to me, and he said, we only have one Seventh-day Adventist in this church. And when Salongu came and we had to work, she wouldn't work. And we tried everything. We promised her this, we promised her that. We beat her with sticks, we beat her with hoses. But she wouldn't break down. He said she doesn't read or write, but she had memorized the Bible. And so when we asked her from the Bible what they believed, she knew where the texts were. So she gave the text to us and we read them. And we got to the place where we said, well, we're all wrong and she's right. So in doing Salongu for the government, they built the Adventist church every Sabbath for all those years when they had to do it. And it was there. And I thought I was going to stop preaching in an hour, so I stopped. And they said, no, you've got to go on. We've never seen an Adventist preacher. We want to know everything. All we know is what this sister has told us. And by the time the sun set, they were the happiest bunch I have ever seen. But I'd never seen a church that was built on Sabbath before. But this was one built. There is a God in heaven who answers prayers. There were 40 different denominations whose leaders asked if we would teach them what we believe. It was an amazing experience for me. I had to teach those 40 presidents of other denominations. One was Église de Christ sur la Terre, all kinds of different names, but they all believed that Jesus was coming again, and they believed that the seventh day was the Sabbath. They studied the Bible on their own. One was a Catholic priest, and he quizzed me like I have never seen before. And I said, why are you quizzing me like that? Well, he said, I want to make sure that you believe what the Bible teaches. And I said, where did you learn it? He said, well, our church members went to an Adventist church to get food and clothing. And in the box of food and clothing, there was a book called Desire of Ages, and Great Controversy. And he said, I read those books through, and I checked it with the Bible, and I decided I was in the wrong church. So he said, I started my own church. And he says, right now I have 120,000 people. And he said, I want to know. He said, I had no idea that this book was a Seventh-day Adventist book. He said, I didn't even know anything about it. So these guys came together at Lulangeli, and we spent 2 or 3 weeks, and we went through every doctrine, had evangelistic meetings, and had a most wonderful time. And I said to myself, there is a God in heaven who sees everything. But you know, when I went to that airport, my gut feeling was I'd like to fly home and see my wife again. When I saw the faithfulness of those people, I said I'd prefer to die with them. There was nothing that would dissuade them from doing what God had told them in the Bible. They didn't want to ask their pastor or anything else. Said, we don't need to ask it. We know what it is. The Bible's clear. Daniel prayed at the window every day. He never hid when he knew that what he did would. They said, if we're going to be killed, we want to go from God's church. Everywhere in the country, the people came to church, and the soldiers took them away. There were not enough prisons for them, so they wrote a letter to Mobutu. What are we going to do? And either build more prisons or change it. Eventually, the Adventists were allowed to worship on Sabbath and work on Sunday. It took a long time, but it did work out. And in my mind, I had to come to the conclusion, what would I be willing to do? And I'm asking you today. I know I've gone over. I'm ashamed of myself. But you know, it says there in Revelation in the 14th chapter and verse 12, here is the patience of the saints. Here are those who keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. There are two things that are mentioned there. And I asked myself, what was Jesus' faith? What is the faith of Jesus? I think we all have faith in Jesus. We believe he was the Son of God. We believe he's coming again. We believe he died for us. But do we have the faith of Jesus? Jesus had the faith to be willing to die. He had the faith to be taken bodily by Satan to the top of the mountain and be tested. And yet, he did it all because he loved us and he gave his life for us. What are we willing to do for Jesus? I don't think in my life before I'd ever had to make a decision which would I do what the Lord had asked us to do, or would I do what was convenient for me? And I just hope and pray that in the future I won't change. But at that point in my life, I knew what I had to do. And every one of them knew what they have to do. And I'm challenging you today in the difficult times in which we're living, at a time when we all believe that our Lord will return, and we know the times of trouble will come. What are we willing to do? Are we willing to die for the Lord if necessary? Let's hope so. But I'm challenging each one of you to live for God in the period of time we have between now and who knows. Millie keeps saying this is the last year we come down. You know, when you get old, you never know, do you? We've been married 62 years. You know, who knows how long that'll go. But may we live for Jesus while we have life. And may we be willing to do anything for him as long as we live. It's my prayer today that each one of us will, as we look through the Bible, look through Galatians, where it tells us about the faith in Jesus, the faith of Jesus, all the faith that is needed is through Jesus Christ our Lord. He gives it to us. Anything we have, it's Jesus through the Holy Spirit that gives it to us. And we thank him for it. And we pray, Lord, that you'll be with each one here, that as we continue to follow in the footsteps of our Savior, in whatever we do, may we be willing to know that the Holy Spirit is with us and will guide us into all things. Amen. Is there a benediction, or is the...